And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. I'll read the 22:17 as well. If her father utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Okay, now this is a very interesting rule in my estimation, principle, because this isn't rape. The maid is enticed. She's attracted and does this. It's implied voluntarily, but that nonetheless the man is obligated to make her his wife or to pay the penalty if that's impossible. And this might be worth discussing, although it's obviously very contentious. There's a pointer here to the sacrality of sex. And of course, in our culture, we're tempted to believe that sex can be mere enjoyment, a form of entertainment, I would say, a light form of entertainment even. And that the reason that that's the case is because, in principle, we have reliable birth control, and so the consequences of the sexual act that have been lessened in their heaviness. And so then the question opens up in front of us: if we have reliable birth control, is sex then now to be properly regarded as just another form of entertainment, or does it carry with it the burden of something approximating permanent relationship? And my sense is that even though the technology has enabled us to prevent the ultimate consequences of the act, I don't believe that mitigates the seriousness of the interaction. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that we've lost that has damaged intimate relationships almost beyond repair by making the part of them that is most significant emotionally and physically into something that's now as trivial as the lightest of entertainment. I don't think it's done us well, and obviously that's quite a conservative position in the political sense, but everything I see going on around me seems to point to...
Conservative or rational? I'm not being cute. Why is it conservative? Conservative might be prescriptive, but what you've described, I read over and over in left-wing sources, in progressive sources, how many depressed young women there are in the culture of our what is it called again? The
hookup.
The hookup culture.
Yeah, right.
Very few people would say that this has benefited women.
Mm. Well, I also see in the left-wing culture there's this strange splitting of attitude towards sexuality. And so on the one hand, there's this proposition that every possible variant expression of sexual desire and action is not only permissible, but to be celebrated in a mandatory manner. But simultaneously, every single interaction that's even vaguely sexual between a young man and a young woman is so pregnant with danger, so to speak, that it has to be reduced to an explicit contractual arrangement before it can even be undertaken. And so I think the fact that both of those tendencies exist on the left simultaneously, the left being that part of our political discourse that tends toward the breaking of arbitrary constraints, that's an indication that there's some underlying set of regulating principles that's been violated. You get an excess in libertinism on the all sexual proclivities are to be celebrated front, and the simultaneous legalism that emerges, because that does put young women in in uncomfortable situations that are extraordinarily hard on them. So you get questions arising, for example, well, can a young woman give consent to a sexual interaction of any sort if she's intoxicated by alcohol? And it isn't the right-wingers who are bringing up that issue fundamentally. Yeah. It's the left-wingers, and their answer is, well, no, absolutely not.
That's a contradiction of tectonic proportions
absolutely.
within that worldview.
What it isn't a contradiction with, though, is this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not reciprocal. This is this is saying that if I don't see here an equal and opposite commandment. If a woman entices a man to sleep with him, then she's
forced to marry him. Right?
No, this is the view here is that men have an absolute responsibility not to engage in commitmentless sex, and that to do so is to take or do something that that is not reciprocal, and
And
you know,
it
so
exploits-
conservatives who want to point out these hypocrisies on the left should have to grapple with whether they are prepared to speak a kind of truth to power to men and say, this is intrinsic to your masculinity, is to take responsibility in this regard.
There's that famous documentary that came out recently, What is a Woman? And there's actually a biological answer to that question. There's a multitude of them. One of them is, maybe you could say this, that's the principle of the biological reality, is that the female is that sex which takes primary responsibility for reproduction and bears disproportionate weight in doing so. That's what constitutes female. And that's true right at the level of sperm and ova. And it propagates, it's fractal. And so the reason it's the man that's taking advantage here is because the price he'll pay for it is nowhere near as high as the price she'll pay for it, either emotionally or conceivably practically. And so it is fundamentally his sin, right? And I think it's very much...
The confusion in the young, I mean, so I work in a very odd kind of college. It's a good one. But we figured out that the kids don't understand much about sex. And so we started offering a course called The Theology of the Body. And it is the most popular course on the campus now. And, you know, we're having to recruit half the faculty to teach it. Because,
using the teachings of John Paul II?
Yeah, such things, you know. In other words, it's... they understand sex is very consequential, right? It's a big thing. And in what way is it a big thing? And how should you, you know, because they want it, they're human. What is its purpose? And all of that, right? And it's not enough to say, because like we're talking about details here that are almost romantic, you know, because the preciousness of a woman, her, you know, we teach the young men, don't foul that. That's a wonderful thing, you know, and they, listen, it's good for them.
Conservatives like to talk a lot about the hatred of men and the diminution and the problems in the education system. They're completely right to do so. But we really have to ask, I mean, to what extent some of it is a consequence of the abdication of fundamental responsibilities?
Yeah, well, I think it's not only an abdication of fundamental responsibilities, it's also a diminution of the pleasure principle itself, because I don't believe that it's unreasonable to make the presumption that there is no more sacred act than sexual congress in some fundamental sense. And then what that means is that to diminish that to the status of light entertainment is to take the thing in your life that could be among the highest and to make that nothing but that which is casual. And that means there's no increment on the hedonic side at all, quite the contrary. And I would say I think part of the evidence for that seems to be that more and more young people aren't having sex. They're not engaging in relationships. Well, they're not having sex with another person. I mean, pornography use is rife, although even there's now evidence that among young men, the proportion of young men who have zero sex, which includes even the use of pornography, has started to climb up dramatically. And so it could easily be that we put ourselves in a situation where making sex as freely accessible as possible and as casual as might be imaginable has actually demolished its hedonic utility as well as its integration within a broader set of moral constraints.
This may be very obvious, but if you take your view, which I agree with totally, there's a way towards that, and this is safeguarding. In other words, the young man who's done that hasn't gone through the betrothal and the dowry and all that sort of stuff. So it's a protection of the very ways that the Jews saw you had to approach marriage.